To Coda Conversations. We have Devontae Moore. How's it going, man?
All right, going well. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. Glad to have you on the show, man. We've finally been able to get you on.
Yep, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to have the opportunity, and hopefully, I can give your audience some value.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself to the audience? Like, how did you get into coding? What's your tech stacks?
Up, I think I went out. Either one of us went out on a internet connection, but I didn't hear. I don't know if you had a question for me.
Okay, yeah, I said, yeah, if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself to the audience? Like, what is your tech stack, and how did you even get into coding in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm Devontae Moore. Some people may know me from my newsletter, Dev with Devontae. So I got into, I guess my first formal start in computer science was probably with my 2 year degree. I got a computer science degree at Nashville State, and associates of computer science, and that kind of introduced me to sort of like the basics, if statements, for loops. We were using C++, so we weren't actually building like websites. I wish we were, because in 2 years, if you're practicing like actual HTML, CSS, or just anything a little bit more, I would say functional, you can get pretty good. But it was more on the theory side, just learning what's kind of going under the hood with computers. So that was sort of like my first introduction. And then from there, I was just sort of on this self-taught journey of just learning different languages. I was kind of getting caught up in the shiny object syndrome of going from PHP, then going to JavaScript, and then building an Android app, and just kind of all over the place. I didn't have that focus like I needed to. And then eventually, I think that just caught up with me, and because I didn't have purpose and focus, I ended up just sort of just giving it up for a while and would dabble here and there. But then eventually, once COVID hit, that kind of gave me an opportunity to get back into the game, because my employer had put everyone on furlough, and then eventually we formally got laid off. So during that time, I got back into refreshing myself with React, and specifically React Native, and I just kind of had a plan to build an app and kind of market myself on LinkedIn. And eventually, I got little freelance gigs here and there, contract gigs, and I want to say after a few years, I eventually landed a full time gig. Thank God, and then the rest is history from there. But that's pretty much the big picture, high level presentation of my story.
Yeah, I think you brought up an important point. Like, it's very difficult for juniors to get in the industry in an official capacity. So, kind of have to get in through the side door by freelancing and small contracts. Like, how are you able to procure clients and get some of those smaller roles?
Really, just being active on LinkedIn, and I know that, especially if you're on LinkedIn, you hear that advice a lot, and it's a little bit more difficult. But back when I was on LinkedIn, which was 2021, like it definitely helped. Just being active, responded to actually one of the jobs I got was I was sort of just casually strolling. I wish I was on there for like actual business purposes, but I was just on there just kind of chilling, scrolling, just seeing what was going on. And I saw someone who needed help with like a view project. And I noticed that everyone had responded to him through the actual post. So I decided to kind of go through the back door and actually give him a direct message. And that actually helped, because he said, because I had a little bit more initiative, he was like, "Hey, you seem like the guy to get stuff done." That's actually how I got one of my freelance gigs like that. But yeah, just being active on LinkedIn, being pretty prolific with content, and just putting yourself out there, trying to give value. Right now, my actual content, so I actually took, I want to say probably 2 weeks away from LinkedIn. Maybe some people notice, and that's because I wanted to kind of reevaluate things, because I realized my content strategy was great for accumulating, followers here and there. But I realized with just the whole kind of economy right now in the state of tech, it's like, well, my goal right now is not necessarily trying to be an influencer. Like I do want to influence people in a positive way, but I also want to, if I'm going to be on LinkedIn and creating content and making their platform more valuable, I want to kind of, get some value myself. So I'm focusing my content more on trying to market my skills and really have the mindset of like a business owner, or or just an owner in general, of like, hey, I want to market and sell my skills, and not so much getting caught up in just the whole LinkedIn kind of social media thing.
Yeah, that's a very smart point. A lot of people they don't realize the distinction between being an influencer or being like a businessman, or somebody who's there for a specific purpose.
Right.
Um, you can have less followers, but you can have more opportunities because you're connecting with the right people. So, like, what are some of the strategies you're using now? Like, how exactly did you change up from what you were before to what you're doing now?
So now what I'm doing is I'm always trying to point to something, an experience or skill set that I have or a skill set that I'm learning. So like my I think my like I had a post yesterday where I was pointing to a project I finished for a client, right? That was sort of my hook. It was like, hey, I just finished a project for a client. So I'm trying to write content in a sense of like, hey, if a CEO or product manager is seeing this, oh, I want to be able to sell myself to them, right? So I started off like, and I was intentional like about that. And then I was like, hey, I did this. I helped juniors out, right? Oh, that shows leadership. Told them that, hey, I'm trying to learn more structure and systems because I want to have more of a senior mindset because I've worked with seniors, and one of the difference between seniors and juniors is seniors are the ones that are setting up the systems and the structures and the protocols and the consistency in the code base and the automation tools. They're setting that stuff up, and then usually the mids and the juniors are working within that. And I kind of want to get to that level. So I mentioned that, hey, I'm learning this tool called Connects, or I think it's Next.js, is a query builder for like a Postgres database and other databases as well. And they have, I was like, hey, they have this way of migrating databases to make it more easier. And I was saying like, hey, normally I would have just skipped over this, but hey, the new me wants to learn this because I know that this can make it better in a team setting. So just being way more intentional about like marketing my mindset, skills, brand, etc.
Yeah, that's really smart, man. Like you mentioned, you have to be intentional. You have to have this specific focus. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of be on there posting, whatever pops up in your mind. And, you're not really going to get the results you expect because you don't even have any results in mind. So, yeah, it's really smart to shift your focus around and say, I want to do X, Y, and Z to get, these results. Yeah, so can you talk about some of the other opportunities that you've gotten on LinkedIn just from being prominent and visible?
I would say for the most part, so I would say I did. So I did get, yeah, one of my full time gigs I did get from LinkedIn because I think I don't know it verbatim, but I had a post where I was essentially saying, um, I think I'm changing my mind on the idea of working for an enterprise company solely. And I was saying, hey, I think it might be a better idea to be a contractor and having different projects because if one project goes down, if you're working on three or four, right, it's like it's essentially like you have three or four different, streams of income. And personally, I feel like that's better than just saying, hey, I'm going to work for one single company. And then someone who was, um, I can't think of his actual title. I think he's like a fractional CTO. I think he had reached out and said, "Hey, I know one of these companies that might have like an opportunity for you," and I ended up doing some freelance work. They knew I was a junior, and they were actually looking to hire a junior. And after I completed sort of like the freelance work, they decided to hire me on full time. So I got a full time gig talking about contract work. Go figure.
Oh wow, yeah, that's really interesting, man. So yeah, I know a lot of juniors now. They're finding it almost impossible to break into the industry. So like, let's just say you were a junior in 2024. What would you do to stand out and to try to get in, to try to slip into the door?
I would probably, well, first, I think I would make sure this is just me personally. I can't speak for anyone else, but I would want to have a steady source of income, right? I would want to have some type of full-time job and just kind of do this part-time. Because what I wouldn't want to do is go kind of all in and put myself in a situation to where it's like, okay, I go all in, and what if it doesn't work out? And to me, I feel like juniors, like if someone's going to hire you, they're going to have it's not going to be because you have all of this experience. So it's going to be something else, like maybe you're showing your capacity to learn, your drive, your willingness to be a team player, which you can post content on there to kind of brand yourself. But I don't think it's going to be because you're studying leak code for 100 hours. I realized like when I got into my job, we weren't doing any type of leak code stuff, and I realized I had huge um, what do you call it gaps in my skill, and it was just thankfully I had two senior engineers that were just willing to show me, hey, you got some gaps here, but we're going to help you fill on those gaps. And it was really just their grace, right? I truly believe in the beginning you're relying on grace more than skill and grit, because I forgot who it was. I think it was Taylor. I think he's like a recruiter on there, and he was saying a lot of hiring managers, not a lot, but this one hiring manager said they don't hire juniors because they don't know anything, right? And I thought I kind of was against that because I worked hard, I had a lot of grit, but once I got my first junior role, I realized, you know what, I didn't, So it's to me, I would rather keep a job, have a full-time job, continue to do this on the side, make it part-time, and then just wait for that opportunity. Um, that doesn't mean you have to be completely passive, but there is a sort of waiting and a sort of grace that you do have to kind of wait for. I mean, you can definitely, I'm not saying be lazy, don't do anything, but you are relying on more grace than what you realize. And I think some people think they're just going to open up the doors themselves through just grinding their teeth and just working on leak code 100 hours and or making 100 React apps, and it's like that's I don't believe that's how it works.
Yeah, I know with a lot of juniors, it's all about attitude. Like a lot of companies, they would rather hire the less technically proficient guy who has a better attitude versus this junior who knows it all, and you gotta always wrestle with them to get things done. Like like when you're coming into a company, they already have an established way of doing things, so you're not going to tell them how to do things in the app. So if you're coming in and you already know it all, it becomes a problem quickly. But yeah, you also made a smart point about like not going broke waiting for your tech job. Like one of the things I did when I got in, prior to getting in, I was working at a hotel and they had a lot of Excel work that I had to do. So I used like VBA to automate a lot of the processes. So like if you can find coding opportunities at your current opportunity, um, that's another way to get experience. Or maybe going to a church who needs tech work done, you can get some experience that way. There's a lot of different ways to get experience.
Totally agree. And just to piggyback on that, I think what I would something else I would do just based off of previous experience is sort of like treat myself like more like an entrepreneur, because I don't know who I said this to, but I said something along the lines of clients are less picky than employers, right? Like a freelance client is not looking for a resume that has Harvard and bachelor's degree in computer science and solving doing a thousand leak code problems, right? Like they just want someone that can get their WordPress site up and going, or you know customize their Shopify site, or build some feature or something like that, or fix some bug. So seeking out those folks who are just looking for technically minded folks, because if you went to boot camp or got a computer science degree and you were successful, like to me that proves that okay, you have a technical mindset. So I think that it's a lot easier to get a client, right, versus trying to get onto some company in the beginning.
Yeah, that's definitely true because the client, they just need this work done. They don't really care about hiring the perfect guy. They just need someone who can get it done at a reasonable price. So yeah,
Yep.
they don't have the as rigorous of testing. So yeah, like how do you go about getting these clients? You go to a place like Upwork or Link, or just is it just solely LinkedIn for now?
Me personally, I prefer LinkedIn. It's a little bit harder. Upwork just seems a little bit crowded and shady these days. I personally don't like Upwork because it's not like you don't know who you're talking to. At least with LinkedIn, like there's profile pics, there's businesses, like people's reputation on the line. So I feel like there's a little bit of skin in the game, but you can definitely try it. That's just me personally. Just because I don't like Upwork doesn't mean you can't try it. LinkedIn is can be a little bit. I think it's kind of hard. I personally try to find roles that's kind of in the states. And I've had a hard time doing that. But you can go locally, like go to a local, digital marketing agencies. Usually, there's a digital marketing now is there's sort of like this fine line between digital marketing and tech. There might be opportunities there. Just going to business events, like local networking events, like go to meetup.com and see if there's like a local business networking event. Because essentially, businesses need tech, right, to some capacity. And if you're in tech, it's like, hey, you have a mindset and probably a skill set that they can use.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of these smaller businesses. They're just focused on surviving, and there a lot of times their websites aren't up to snuff. They have no idea about automation. So if you can come in and show them how you can maximize their processes, how you can get their website up to par, you might have opportunity there. So yeah, I think now, especially for juniors, is shifting just from being a technologist to more of a like an entrepreneur, salesman slash technologist. Like you have to be able to sell your skills now. The opportunities are not like raining from the sky like they were, say, in 2016.
Right. I mean, and I'm just not saying this, and I got like this full-time gig at Twitter and, making all this money. And I'm telling you just the work for peanuts. Like I'm doing 1099 work, right? I don't, I'm doing contract work. And, the company I'm partnered with, they even do kind of like sales incentives. So, I can potentially double dip by if I get a client and it closes, there's a sell incentive on top of whatever money I could potentially earn from actually doing the coding on the project. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know you kind of started off with the front end, and now you're dipping into DevOps and the back end. What made you want to be more of a full stack versus just solely focusing on one side of the equation?
I think I've kind of just the way my mind works. Like, it's hard for me to just learn one piece of the system, right? Like, that's just not how I work. Like, if I'm like, I watch MMA, and I know in MMA, some guys will just like focus on stand up, maybe kickboxing, or some guys are just focused on wrestling and the ground game. And I know me, I'm like, I would want to do it all. Like, if there's multiple parts to a system, like I want to know about all those parts. And DevOps is just it's super interesting to me. It's also functional. I feel like, okay, I don't want to be the type that can build an app, but I have no idea how to deploy it or maintain it. And I think once you kind of get more what I call when you're an end-to-end developer, where it's like, hey, you can go all the way from building UI to deployment and CI/CD and maintaining, working with databases. And like I feel like now you kind of step into like, hey, you can be a founder potentially and create your own thing or help other people support their own thing. And my guess is in the future, I think that's going to be the expectations for developers. I think the days of just HTML and CSS and JavaScript, I think that's probably going to come to an end if it isn't already. And I think the field is just too competitive. And I think I want to be the one where it's like, hey, you could put me, you want me to build this UI with Tailwind, I can do that, right? You want me to create some type of, query on a database. Hey, I want to be comfortable with databases and database migration. If you're like, hey, we want to do some CI, CD pipeline, hey, I want to be comfortable with that. So I just want to be versatile, and wherever you put me, I'm not like, oh my goodness, what is, I don't want to feel like a fish out of water, right? I was actually listening to John Jones, who is MMA fighter, and you might hear me reference MMA a lot, but he was talking about this one position. It wasn't your traditional stand up position. It wasn't the sexiest thing. It was like more of a where you're kind of more in a grappling and trying to get control, wrist control, and hand control. Something that's kind of not super sexy, right? Compared to head kicks and jabs, and he was saying a lot of people don't practice this. And he was saying you want to practice these things like this because you never want to be uncomfortable, right? You want to be wherever the fight goes, you want to be comfortable. And that's kind of like my mindset with tech right now.
Yeah, exactly. And if you say you're a front end engineer and you start researching DevOps in the back end, it's going to help you as a front end engineer because you're going to know where the data comes from. You're going to know, like, okay, say you get a CORS error, you're going to know why is this happening and how you can solve it. So, yeah, just that broader perspective. And I think another point would be like with AI coming into the picture, especially with the front end, is going to be a lot easier to automate the front end and the back end. So just having that end to end knowledge, like you say, is like very important so that you don't get caught off guard and you're just unable to find new roles because companies, instead of hiring juniors, they're just using AI to generate the front end and having some senior, twist the code a little bit to what they want.
Yep, that's a good point. I was actually thinking about that. I don't know if I wrote a post about it, but yeah, I was actually thinking about like how front end is like I can see companies delegating more AI on the front end because it's the UI, HTML, CSS. The, it's not there's not too much you have to worry about. Obviously, there's some edge cases, but I can see them being a little bit more leery as far as having AI tinkering with the database, tinkering with some of their CI/CD pipelines. Because I giving AI complete control or even a lot of control over that, like I could see companies being like, I don't think so. I think they're gonna probably always want to have some type of um, human interaction when it comes to their backend systems versus the UI, which is like, pr- you know, assuming it's not doing something super hacky and turning it into like a hacker. For the most part, if it's just strictly UI, I think that's a lot simpler and safe to sort of let AI delegate.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, a lot of companies they're not gonna allow their back end with all the proprietary data be exposed to the AI because once the AI goes through the code base, it's in the AI's system. So that poses like a huge security risk. So I would say like back end, unless for the purpose of like scaffolding, like just creating a basic database setup like a just a basic scaffold for the app that might be used for AI on the back end, but the actual building of the application is going to require human engineers.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, man. I know that you also created a newsletter. What was your purpose of the newsletter? What made you want to get out there in that regard?
I enjoy writing. I enjoy teaching, just creating. I think in the back of my mind, I think I probably saw it as just a way to market myself. And also too, I do kind of have a entrepreneurial spirit as far as like, hey, trying to do the whole online thing of building an audience and then maybe selling a course or something like that later. I had to, I took a step back from that because again, I have to kind of be a little bit more intentional with my time. But my goal with that is to um, hopefully put out some more content, things that I'm learning, things that I'm building, and just putting out more content like how we're discussing, right? Maybe how to brand yourself with more intentions, maybe getting more into DevOps, things of that nature. So
Absolutely. So yeah, to kind of wrap things up, man. What are the top three lessons that you've learned as a software engineer right now that you would recommend that juniors really focus on?
well, it depends. The first one might not apply if you're not Christian, but as a Christian, I would say definitely trust and hope in God with your journey. Because it's been for me, this has been a faith journey more than anything. Honestly, I don't even think I'd be here on this podcast if it wasn't for the grace of God and walking by faith. Because I definitely had my moments of wanting to quit and give up, and heck, even gave up, emotionally and mentally, plenty of times. But definitely for me, definitely trusting God and trusting His sovereignty and that He's guiding your steps and guiding you in the direction He has meant for you. I think after that, I would say, let's see. I would probably say seek. I would probably say get off the line too. Like, don't put all your eggs in the online LinkedIn basket. I know there's a lot of people on LinkedIn will tell you to be on LinkedIn and market yourself, but I would kind of get offline and go network with people offline and build relationships offline and go talk to people like you said at your local church where you go wherever you're around community. Tell people what you're doing, what your goals are. Because I even, I had talked to one of my local congregation members like a while ago, and that actually led to a potential opportunity. It didn't work out, but the fact that it was like, hey, I talked to him. He knew I was an engineer. Someone at his job needed help, needed a developer, and they reached out. So, if you do that, let's just say that happens to you 100 times, like eventually I have to say one of those should hit, right? So just networking offline and not just online. And I would say take your time with studying. Like I realized, like when I got my role, my first kind of full time role, where I was there for a while, it like a lot of my skills got exposed. Like I was lacking, and I had to definitely dig in and really get mentorship. And I think they were lacking was because I think what we end up doing is we just kind of have learned things, and I think we get zealous because we want to go to the next thing and we want to grow and we just want it bad. But I think the way to growth is just to really take your time, um, and just go slow, super slow. Take your time. I think I heard Kobe Bryant say once he spent 6 months working on his jump shot. That's like one, in the game of basketball, that's one piece of the game, and he decided to take 6 months just to work on that. So, I mean, you could do that with code. You could say, "Hey, I'm gonna spend 6 months learning databases." Right? I'm not gonna try to learn databases and leak code and Next.js and React Native. Like, hey, I'm just gonna have my focus be on databases. Maybe small little thing on the side, but mainly databases.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying focused and being intentional about your learning is important. But yeah, like you mentioned, in-person networking is extremely important now because online networking is kind of saturated. Like if somebody posts an opportunity on LinkedIn, it's like, 1,000 people from all over the world are looking at that same opportunity, and it's almost like a lottery at that point. Whereas, you meet people in person, you establish a relationship, they trust you, that's going to allow them to give you first preference when they have an opportunity.
Yep.
Okay. So like just in closing though, when it comes to in-person networking, uh, what do you find like in terms of presenting yourself? What is it important to have? Like, okay, I got my business cards ready to go. I have a site that they can go to see what I'm about, or are do you have to be a good speaker? What's important when it comes to in-person networking?
I think it depends on the context. So the meetup I went to was sort of a tech meetup, so it was just pretty casual. I was just myself, and the reason why I kept going was it was more for fun, right? So if I would have approached that kind of meetup with like this, oh, I gotta talk to this many people, I gotta pass out this many business cards. I think I probably would have missed out and just would have, maybe left and quit. But because I was just going for fun, I ended up meeting up with the person that was going to kind of give me my current opportunity. So I think it just really depends. If you're going to like a traditional, formal kind of business networking event, absolutely. Like be prepared to introduce yourself. I would be more prepared though to listen to them and hear their problems, because I actually learned that in a sales book. Like good salespeople aren't they're they're not trying to really persuade you. They're really just trying to understand your problems, um, and show you how you can fix them. So I would be more of a listener and really listening to folks and finding out what they do, what they're interested in, what their problems are, and then how you can help them with their problems.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. But yeah, man. In closing, man, do you have any thoughts for our audience?
Um, not right off the bat. Not outside of the 3 points I gave and the kind of business tactics. Oh, I will say this. I would add, a lot of people in tech will just kind of focus on tech and then forget about other skills like not negotiation and sales and communication. I would definitely like learn, like tap into that, right? How you communicate with people. Because you're really like, if the goal is to sell your skills, well, you got to know how to sell. And I think reading books like Influence, I think that's a good book. That I think that's just a good general communication book that everyone should be reading. Because I think we all want to influence people, hopefully for good, and knowing how to influence and knowing how to kind of sell and communicate, negotiate is, I think, just a good base skill for everyone, especially if you're in tech trying to sell your skills. So I think adding that to your toolbox, and not just focusing on the tech, is something you should consider.
Absolutely. But yeah, man, I definitely appreciate you for coming on to the show, man. You're welcome back anytime. And thank you everybody for tuning in. But we'll catch y'all next time. Peace.